Today, we're tackling a connection that's hiding in plain sight. It's the link between chronic pain and the heartbreaking rise in teen suicide risk. This is a story that really lives at that intersection of physical health and deep, deep mental anguish.
So, just to give you a sense of the scale here, it's staggering. Think about this. In 2021, nearly 1 out of every 4 high school students had seriously considered suicide. 1 in 4. That's not just some abstract number. It's a quiet epidemic unfolding in our schools.
When we have this conversation, our minds usually go to things like depression or bullying or maybe conflict at home. And those are all incredibly important. But what if a major driver is something we've been looking at completely separately? The latest research is pointing to this really powerful link that we just can't afford to ignore anymore.
So to really get this, we first have to see how these two massive public health challenges, teen suicide and chronic pain, have actually been growing side by side.
Let's just put these two crises right next to each other. On one side, you have suicide, which was the 3rd leading cause of death for young people ages 15 to 29 back in 2021. And on the other side, chronic pain. It now affects more than 20% of adolescents around the globe. That's 1 in 5 teens living with persistent pain that just grinds them down, day in and day out.
And here's the absolute kicker, the thing that changes everything. New research confirms that chronic pain isn't just a side effect of depression, it is a powerful, independent risk factor for suicide. That means the pain itself is driving the risk. And that really changes how we have to think about prevention.
This leads us to a really critical idea, a new way of thinking that helps explain this link. It's the concept of mental pain, and it's something different than just a diagnosis of depression.
So the clinical name for it is psychalgia, but let's just call it what it is, mental pain. And this isn't about checking off a list of symptoms for a diagnosis. It's that raw, personal, subjective feeling of unbearable suffering. And what's wild is that recent studies are showing this feeling is a stronger predictor of a suicide attempt than a clinical depression diagnosis is.
So let's just be crystal clear on the difference here. Depression? That's the clinical diagnosis, right? It has a set of criteria. But mental pain? That's the experience. It's that feeling of, I cannot bear this anymore. And that's the thing that directly motivates someone to seek an escape.
This quote from the research really just says it all. When a teen starts talking about their pain, and it doesn't matter if it's physical or emotional, when they call it unbearable, that is a direct, critical, red alert warning sign. We have to treat it that way.
Okay, so how does this happen? How does physical pain set off this dangerous chain reaction that leads to such mental anguish? Well, it turns out there's a pretty specific cognitive process at play.
It's like a 4-step cascade. First, you've got the chronic pain itself, just there, all the time. Over time, that can lead to something called pain catastrophizing. That's when your brain gets stuck on the pain, focusing on it, amplifying it, imagining the absolute worst. This, in turn, pours fuel on the fire of depression, which then directly elevates the risk of suicidal thoughts. It's this tragic but predictable chain reaction.
Now this is really important. This crisis of pain and suicide doesn't affect all young people in the same way. Not at all. There are systemic issues here that place a much heavier burden on some communities over others.
The data here paints a pretty stark picture. The risk of suicidal thoughts is way higher for Black girls. It's even higher for Native youth. And for LGBTQIA+ youth, their risk is nearly 2.5 times that of their peers. This isn't hitting everyone equally, and we have to see that.
And the risk just gets compounded. We know chronic pain itself is more common among girls and racial minorities. So you take that, and then you layer on systemic stressors like racism or discrimination, and then maybe socioeconomic hardship on top of that, you end up with this perfect storm of vulnerability. It's an intersection, and any real solution has to address it head-on.
Okay, so that's a lot to take in, but what does a better path forward actually look like? The good news is, research is starting to point us towards some clear, actionable strategies for the next decade.
Now check out this statistic. It is absolutely mind-blowing, and it shows where the biggest opportunity is. Teens who die by suicide are more than twice as likely to have seen their pediatrician right before their death than a mental health specialist. The doctor's office. That is a critical point of intervention that we are too often missing. It pretty much screams for universal mental health screening in pediatric care. And of course, technology has a role to play. There's a lot of promise in new AI models that can help predict risk, not just by looking at symptoms, but by digging for root causes. Things like disrupted sleep patterns that it can pick up from data. The whole idea is to get ahead of the crisis, to move from just reacting to actually predicting.
But, and this is a really, really big but, we have to be careful. A major study found that while these AI models are great at processing data, they just don't have the clinical reasoning or the safety planning skills of a human. The research is clear, these things are not ready to make life-or-death decisions on their own.
So the right way forward is what's called a human-in-the-loop model. This is where the AI becomes a powerful assistant. It can flag high-risk kids, it can spot patterns a human might miss, but the final judgment, the care plan, the empathy, that has to come from a trained human clinician, always.
So ultimately, the real solution isn't one single thing. It's a truly integrated model of care. It's about breaking down the walls between departments. It means the pain doctor is talking to the psychologist. Physical therapy is coordinated with the family and the school. And things like telehealth are just a normal part of the system, making it easier for every kid to get help.
And all of this leaves us with one final essential question. In a healthcare system that's built around specialists and billing codes, how do we pivot? How do we build a new system that sees the whole person, their physical pain, their mental suffering, their whole world? Answering that, well, it's not just some academic exercise. It's the challenge that could literally save a generation. Thanks for joining this explainer.